In this lesson, we're going to create the title for our infographic that's going to live at the top of our poster. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of zoom in here and we'll get started right there at the top. Now, I want to use a photo as kind of what's going to be just the backing plate for what you'll see for the text here. So go ahead and open up your layers panel. Since we locked some of our layers in the last lesson, you want to make sure that you have this layer 3 selected. That's where we're going to be placing our photo, type, anything else that we're going to be using for this part. And if you are trying to do it on one of the locked layers, it won't work. So just make sure you have that green layer highlighted. Then we'll go up to File, Place, and this is going to give you the folder I'm in right now. That's going to be your reference files folder in your project files. And I just went inside of the images folder. You can see documents and images. And we're going to be using a picture that you see from this list. And that one is going to be the blue water and yellow fish. So go ahead and place that. And you can see just kind of how that fits in with all of our other pieces right here at the top. Now, I want to get some of that nice, pretty blue water in here. So we'll kind of see this just at the very top there. So I'm just going to kind of reposition that. And actually, I want to make this a little bit smaller. So I'm going to crop this down. But I don't want to go any farther inside of that bleed area there. So this is as small as I can make it with just constraining the picture. And I definitely don't want to stretch the picture like that. So don't do that. If you want it to be smaller, we can use a clipping mask so that it doesn't go down so far into our poster, because that's taking up quite a lot of our room. So what I'm going to do is create a shape that we'll use as that clipping mask. So come over here to your rectangle tool and we'll just click that. I'm going to start up here just right on the edge of that bleed and then draw down as far as I want that picture to extend. And for now, I'm just kind of guessing how big I want it to be. Probably I don't want it to be, too awfully big. So maybe just kind of right in there. So this area right here is going to be what we'll be using for the photo at the top. And now all I have to do is create a clipping mask with those two pieces. So I'm just going to come down here and draw a box around them both to select them. Then we'll right click and say Make Clipping Mask. Now it's important that you have that box on top of the picture in the stacking order. So if you reversed your stacking order where your picture was on top, it might not work exactly the same way. Okay, let's go ahead and zoom in a little bit closer here just so we can kind of see what we're working with. And I want to go ahead now and create kind of another piece that we'll be using as a way to make our text more readable, because I don't want to place my text right on top of the picture. It's going to interfere with some of the shapes in the photo, and I don't want that. So I'm going to come over here and we'll grab the rectangle tool again, and then I'm just going to start right there on the edge of the bleed and that guide we've created and draw a box in this shape. Now, I want the space on the top right here to be equal to that space on the bottom. So you can eyeball that a little bit if you want to, or you could go in and figure out exactly, how much space that was going to be. That'd be exactly ½ an inch below there. So either way, that looks pretty close. I think that's probably close enough. And also, this path that I've just drawn doesn't have any kind of a stroke or a fill on it. So you can see that has none in both of these panels over here. So if we click off, we can't see it. So I'm going to select it here in my layers panel, and then we'll go up to our swatches. And for this one, I want to use kind of a light color. So I'm just going to select that really light swatch that we've created, and we'll just set that right there. Now let's go ahead and set our text on top of this. Maybe we could pull this down just a little bit more. It looks like maybe this is a little bit smaller than what we have down here. So come over here to your layers. I'm going to go ahead and lock the clipping mask for now so that I don't select that or move that around. I have that where I want it. And I'm just going to pull this down just a little bit. There we go. Okay, so now let's set some text on top of that path. And you can lock this path if you want to also, just so we don't move that now that we have it where we want it. And I'm going to come over here and grab my type tool. So we'll just go ahead and open that up and click. And if you're brave, you could just start typing out what you want the title of this to be. Now, I've created a Word document that has all of the copy that we'll be using in this project, and it's also stored in your reference files. And I have that right over here, so you can see kind of what the plan is for the layout of this. And I've kind of gone in and added these underlines just to kind of break it, where we know we're going to be having some breaks in our poster, kind of where one point goes to the next as far as those main headers. So I would say it's always best to copy and paste if you have a document like this, which you really should set up ahead of time, because then you can see if something is misspelled. So, you know, you'll see that little red squiggly line underneath it and say, okay, I need to, you know, figure out the spelling of this. And that way you're not obsessing over checking this document to make sure everything is spelled perfectly right and then still missing something. So I'm going to go ahead and we'll cut and paste this piece of text right here. So we'll just copy it, hit Control C, move it over out of our way, and then we'll come back over here and hit Control V. And that's going to just paste that in there for us. And sometimes I like to set things up on their own layers, so we would have multiple text layers. But for now, I'm just going to go ahead and we'll break this in a way that makes sense. So an overview definitely needs to be on its own line. And I feel like it probably would be a little bit more impactful to have the reefs on its own line as well, and almost kind of have that as its own piece of text. So kind of have these as our 3 different lines. And then we can go in here and really start to play with the typography to bring this to life and make it look a lot more interesting. But part of the reason why I want to do that is just having the reefs on its own line, and also just having it say the reefs instead of coral reefs. I feel like it's just a little bit more interesting, because a lot of images come to mind whenever you hear coral reef, and just hearing the reefs might make it a little bit more interesting to some people. So let's go ahead and I'm going to grab my selection tool, and we'll just start out by kind of scaling that up a bit. And also right now this is left aligned. I want it to be center aligned. So I have my essentials workspace right now, but I'm definitely going to be using the paragraph and character panel a lot. So let's go ahead and open those up. Just go up to Window, go to Type, choose Character, and then I'm also going to have paragraph opened by doing that. So I'm just going to take these over here and we'll just snap them to the bottom of our other tools we have, our other panels. And we'll go ahead and open up that paragraph panel and choose Center Align. And then I want this to be in the exact center of this. And instead of trying to, you know, figure out where that is, I can just come up there to that Align panel that you see up here, or you can use one over here on the side if you have it open. And we'll come over here where it says Align To and choose Align to Artboard, and just choose that horizontal align center, and that's going to nudge that over right into the exact middle of our document. Okay, so now let's go ahead and start setting up our text. So as I said, I'm going to be using a mix of Adobe Garamond and PFDin. So come up here to the top, and we're going to start out with Adobe Garamond for this part at the top. And I'm going to have this part be a little bit smaller, because when I'm thinking about the hierarchy of this, the reefs is the most important thing. So we'll just go ahead and type in Adobe Garamond. And I think this would look nice as all caps, just to get a really straight line across the top and bottom. So we're not getting any kind of variation between how tall those caps are and the lowercase letters. So to change that, you can come over here to Character, and where you see this little panel menu right here, you can click that and just choose all caps right there. And then let's go ahead and do the same thing for these other two as well. I'm going to turn those to all caps also, just to make the title, you know, really stand out. Now the reefs I want to be in my PFDin, so I'm just going to go ahead and type in that. And I'm also, instead of using regular, let's crank that up to bold. So I can drop that down there. You can also get to that from here at the top. And you know what, bold, let's make it even bolder. Let's maybe try extra black. So that's going to be really, really dark, and we'll make this bigger in a moment as well. Now an overview, I'm also going to use Adobe Garamond, so go ahead and type that in. All right, that looks pretty good. And now I want to start playing with the tracking and the point size of this type, and just kind of really pushing some contrast. So right now it doesn't look very contrasty. So I know I want the reefs piece of text to be really large. So let's go ahead and just come up here and crank this up. Now if you just click this one at a time, it's only going to raise it 1 point at a time. But if you hold shift, it's going to move it 10 points at a time. So that's going to make that really nice and big. Let's go ahead and kind of change the leading of this a little bit. So that's going to be right over here. And I'm just going to make those a little bit closer together there. And then this one we'll do on its own just to kind of pull it back up underneath. Just kind of like that. And I'm holding shift just to pull that down in a straight line so I don't accidentally move it from one side to the other. Now I think this would probably look nice tracked out a little bit more than just sitting at 0. So the tracking is going to be this option right here. So again, I'm just going to hold shift while I track that out. And I think that looks pretty good right there at about 150. Now this S looks kind of far away, so I can change the leading, the kerning right here. So I'll just kind of pull that one letter in. You can also do it by just putting your cursor between the two letters, holding Alt and hitting the arrow key in the direction you want it to be kerned. So there I'm hitting that left arrow key, and that's bringing that in a little closer. Now the state of, to me, I think this looks a little bit big. So right now it's sitting at 26. I'm going to take that down to maybe, let's say, like 15. So that looks a little bit better. And then let's track this out as well. So just put some space in here. Just really kind of open that up. Make it feel a little more elegant. And let's also do this to an overview. I'm going to make this even a little bit smaller. So let's maybe just set that at 12. And we'll use the same amount of tracking here. I've set that at 400 for the other piece. Okay, so that looks pretty good there. Now, right now, I have kind of a gap here just because I don't have consistent leading because of how much space the reefs piece of text takes up, and because this is just a little bit smaller. And instead of just coming in here and trying to pull that up, I think it actually might be nice to add a rule line. So have a rule line kind of coming in between the reefs right here. And I want to do that just because the state of the reefs is one statement, and then an overview is another statement. So, you know, if you were just throwing a rule line in there and you had it in between this piece of text and this piece of text, that doesn't really make sense. So, you know, we want to do this with a purpose. So let's come over here, grab our pen tool, and I'm just going to start at the left of the reefs, just kind of right here on that left edge, and I'll click. And then I'm going to come over here to the other side where I want this to be. And instead of trying to make this a straight line myself, if I just hold shift, it's going to draw that in a perfectly straight line. So I'm holding shift, and then I'll just click. And that's going to make that rule line for me. And it looked like that ended up a little bit low. So let's hit the up arrow a couple times just to bring that up a bit. And the way that I did that, I hadn't deselected this path. So you can see that made that arrow a little bit crooked. So I'll just undo that 3 times, and then I'm just going to click off to deselect this point there on the end, which is the last point that we drew. Then I'll select the whole path, and we'll move that up, and now you can see that that's perfectly straight. And even though we just kind of did this, you know, by this edge here and this edge, this feels like it sticks out a little bit farther on the left just because of the space underneath the T here on this side. So I'm going to nudge this over just a little bit to the right. So it's okay, you know, if this isn't mathematically centered, we want it to look optically centered. So, you know, just a little nudge can make a big difference. Now, one other thing that I would like to do is maybe just kind of bring this whole thing up a little bit, because there's quite a bit more space on top of the state of and than what we see here for below an overview. So I'll go ahead and select all of those, and we'll just nudge all those pieces up a little bit. That looks better. And now let's go ahead and choose a font color for this. So right now we have this just set to like the default black. So let's go over to our swatches and choose that navy. So you can see very subtle shift, but it's going to just feel a little more custom. And also let's do that to our line as well. So right now that rule line that we created is just showing up as a fill. I'd like it to be a stroke. So I'm going to switch that and then bring the stroke forward just by clicking that. And let's see how wide of a point that is. That's 1 point. So that looks pretty good. I'll just go ahead and leave that at 1. And then let's also change that to our navy color. All right, we're almost done. One last thing I want to do is, I feel like this piece right here, this plate that we created, it's doing its job as far as making the text more readable, but it's not really showing through anything in the background here. So I'm going to go ahead and come over to my layers panel. We'll unlock that path. And then come over here to where you see the transparency. And if you wanted to, you could go in here and change the opacity. You've probably done things like that before if you're working in Illustrator. But I feel like I might be able to achieve something that looks a little bit prettier by using a blending mode. So that's going to be what you see right here. So you can just kind of come in here and start choosing different ones until you find one that you like. And there's really, a lot to choose from there. Let's try the next one. I really like the way that screen looks. So we'll go ahead and leave that. That just gives me a little bit of, being able to see through it, see through to that picture that we placed in the background, but still my text is very, very readable. So now that we have our title set up, we're ready to go back through and kind of look at that Word document and set up the design for the main header. So we'll talk about how to do that in our next lesson.